have any influence in comparison to what I like to call the Jewish lobby. Some people like to call it the Zionist lobby, but as I said repeatedly, you both have heard me say this a million times, the lobby that got prayer out of the public schools was not them Muslims. It was not the Arab lobby. It was not Islamic fundamentalists. It was the Jewish lobby.
Right.
You know, but people get real sensitive when you say the word Jewish. But what is this lobby? Are we going to call it the anti-school prayer lobby? Now, a lot of people say, it's the ACLU and the liberals. No, it was the Jewish lobby that got school prayer out of the schools. So the Jewish lobby has influence in many, many areas. But, of course, the most overriding influence it has, at least in terms, I believe, of our national survival, is in its misdirection and its misconduct and its abuse of our nation's treasure and the blood of our young people who are being expended in these Jewish wars of survival abroad.
Well, you know, Mike, the thing for me is this. I know a little bit about trajectories, okay, and what I'm talking about here are guns. You've been here, Mike. You know that out here in Idaho, you have to know something about guns if you're going to ward off predators and you're going to hunt and things like that. Now, a long-range shot, okay, if you are off in your aim, just a minuscule amount, that means the difference between you hitting your target or you not even getting anywhere near it, okay? And that is how we have to look at this thing, whatever we want to call it, our truth movement or the patriot movement or whatever. Anybody coming along introducing these ideas that take us off target just a little bit, okay? Okay, in the bigger scheme of things, they say, oh, well, you know, it's 98% right. Yeah, but see, the problem is when you've got a long haul in front of you, okay? And let's not make any mistake about it. I think both of you gentlemen would agree with me. We have a long haul in front of us. We're not going to take our country back tomorrow or next week or even next year. We may be doing this for 100 years. And if we get off target at this stage in the game, instead of winding up in South Africa, we may wind up in Antarctica, right? I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Go ahead, Keith.
You know, Mark, the Patriots, Patriots. I love that. I'm a patriot. The Patriot movement. You know, the last movement I had was about 3 hours ago, and I was just as happy to get rid of that movement as I am this one.
I'd say there's no movement in the Patriot movement, but anyway.
You know, there is a movement, but it's like a Lionel train track. You know, it goes in circles and makes the same stops. You know, I'm amazed at these Patriots. They go, now we're making progress, when they see John Boehner there in a hardware store with his sleeves rolled up. You know, the guy that never saw a war bill that he didn't like, that he didn't love, that he didn't slobber over. You know, he's standing there in the hardware store saying, we've got a pledge to America, which is the contract for America, where we're going back to 1994, and the Patriots are saying, we're making progress. You look at this. They're going to take on Obama. Let me tell you something about Obamacare and cap and trade taxes and all these things that the Patriots are going to stand against. Well, you know what? The Health Care Act and the cap and trade, all these things that they're complaining about, hasn't even taken effect yet, okay? How about the $155 trillion debt that we have right now? Where do you think that came from? Do you think that came from Obamacare? Did that come from cap and trade taxes? No, it came from our out-of-control war spending, our empire building for years. And what does John Boehner have in his pledge to America? He says, we're going to take on Obamacare, we're going to take on the out-of-control spending, we're going to make smaller government, but hey, guess what, guys? We're going to increase that budget in the Defense Department threefold. So in other words, what they're saying is we don't want any of these other entitlement programs to compete with that precious war dollar. Gentlemen, what do you think about that?
Exactly. Yes.
No, you know, it's interesting because today in the front page of the Washington Post is a picture of a young man, a young American, who was in the service, I believe, in Afghanistan. And, he is still alive, even though the upper right-hand corner of his head was blown away. They somehow managed to save this guy and put what was remaining of his head back together. And this is just one of so many young Americans who have been subjected to death and perhaps even worse, maiming in these insane wars that are being fought abroad. And, I just have, I've gotten to the point I just have absolute contempt for people who continue to support these wars in the name of supporting the troops. Mm-hmm. I often on my radio show, I talk about a friend of mine I call the big shot lawyer, big supporter of the troops. I called him up there sitting at lunch. I picked up my cell phone and called him, and I said, I described this picture of this young man on the front page of the Washington Post, and I would suggest people check it out on the Washington Post website. It's horrific. But in any case, I called him up, and I said, what a damn shame it is that you, one of my best friends, that I think of you and your wife when I see these pictures of tragedy. Mm-hmm. This is what it's come down to because, as far as I'm concerned, my friend and his wife, along with all of the other people who have supported these wars blindly, blind support for these wars when they know better, and as my friend and his wife really do, the blood of these young Americans is on their hands just as it is on the hands of these powerful Jewish families, crime syndicates that control the media and control finance and dominate the political debate in our country today.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a sin of commission and a sin of omission. And when these Americans go along with this, even though they may not be the ones signing the orders to send these guys off to fight and die, the fact that what is the lesson that we have been taught now, Mike, ever since the end of the Holocaust, right? Your silence is damning, okay? If you don't stand up against this, then you're just as guilty as the guys who were pouring I can't remember what it was, the Zyklon B into the things. So this idea that these guys, friends of yours and friends of mine, unfortunately, and I know this is going to upset a lot of people out there, but people within our movement who want to drive down the middle of the road here. And they think that they're being clever by running some of these articles that might as well have come right out of Mossad headquarters in Herzliya, that is meant to propagandize the American people, if not into outwardly supporting the war, at least taking an ambivalent stance towards it. If we entertain the notion of saving our country, then we have to resist any injections, any kind of intellectual injections from this Dr. Kevorkian machine that we've got out there. I don't care how small the injection is. Keith, you've been sitting over there listening to all of this. What do you have to say about it?
Well, this is a perfect segue into what I wanted to say. I talked to you about it, I guess, a couple phone calls ago. But what Mike was saying about people like the big shot lawyer, okay? There is someone, this guy is great entertainment, as far as just for entertainment reading. You've got to read the brilliant works of Ted Nugent. You know who Ted Nugent is? The guy he's a rock and roller from the early 70s, it's like Cat Scratch Fever, and right. He's a one-hit wonder. Anyway, the reason I bring him up, not that he's setting the world on fire, but because his writings, he writes these political commentaries, right, which get picked up by the Washington Times, for instance. They feature him regularly.
Seriously?
Anyway, in his writings,
Washington Times is picking up Ted Nugent.
Oh yeah.
Wang Dang Sweet Poontang Ted Nugent.
Right, and he's a frequent guest on Alex Jones' show. And but he's a microcosm of the kind of poisonous conclusions that your average stupid American draws from countless hours of indoctrination from Fox News, talk radio. He's obviously not a propagandist along the lines of, like, say, someone like William Crystal, right? He's not crafting disinformation, disguised as legitimate journalism or anything. He hasn't got that talent. But, he's not a gifted orator like Rush Limbaugh or Beck, but he's perfect. He's perfect to read because he's a product of disinformation, if you know what I mean.
Okay. That's very interesting. I read his crap all the time in the Washington Times, and you have zeroed in on precisely what he is and what he represents.
Right.
And sadly, there's a lot of people who think precisely as he does.
Yeah. He reading is right. It's like you'd read on your average comments board on a Fox News website or something,
right.
or a caller to Sean Hannity. I mean, if you were to submit this stuff to a journalism class, he'd be lucky to get a D-. It's full of chest pounding and insults and false patriotism and broad characterizations, cliches, non sequiturs. You name it. He has a limited knowledge base, and it's all one-sided, and it all sounds directly like everything that he knows comes straight out of the mainstream media. Let me read you a couple things which I put here on my computer screen that he said. Iran's economy already is teetering on the edge. I say we give it a giant shove, push it off the cliff and into the abyss. While the noose of economic sanctions is tightened even further around the throat of Iran, plans should be developed and implemented that make it very unhealthy to be an Iranian nuclear scientist. Let's leave that head-drilling task to the Israeli Mossad. How the Mossad does it is its business, and a fine business it is. And he calls Ahmadinejad Hitler number 2. In the event that Hitler number 2 launches a military strike against Israel because of the economic sanctions or for any other reason, let's hope our military has plans to destroy every critical power generation station, its communication and electronics grids, key bridges, and other critical infrastructure. Iran will need to be reduced to the pre-Stone Age. Let's make it so AA batteries don't even work in Iran. This is stuff. You see, he's not a journalist. He's a product of the journalism.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, he's actually a pretty good writer.
You mean as far as painting a picture with words?
Yeah, he's actually but.
Well, I think I lended to that maybe a little bit. But the way I was reading it.
But in all seriousness, though, as you said, this is this Fox News thing. I don't want to get us sidetracked here, but over the years, I have mentioned this to Mark off the air, and I've mentioned it to a number of people, or I should say a number of people have indicated to me that they have lost longtime friendships with people because those friends had become addicted to Fox News.
Mm-hmm.
Became walking echoes of Fox News, and I'm here to tell you that's the problem with my friend, the big shot lawyer. A guy I used to work with lost a lifelong friend because of that same thing, and I've seen this time and time again. I personally believe, I don't want to sidetrack us here, but I personally believe that Fox News has almost become a cult-like force.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it has, yes.
And now they have created Glenn Beck, and incidentally, Glenn Beck is the featured figure on the front page of the New York Times Magazine this week. And I'm here to tell you, I haven't read the article, but it's obviously a puff piece for Glenn Beck. And then bear in mind that just right after Glenn Beck held his infamous rally here in Washington, the blacks were complaining about it and saying how dare he hijack the memory of Martin Luther King. But you know what? Taylor Branch, who is considered the historian of the civil rights movement of the 1960s,
mm-hmm.
He's written several books on the topic. He is like the historian of the civil rights movement as far as the establishment media is concerned. He wrote a lengthy op-ed piece for the New York Times, which in fact affirmed Glenn Beck's status as someone who was a rightful heir to the legacy of Martin Luther King.
Okay.
Now, that's very powerful.
Right.
A lot of people don't quite understand that, but basically, this character, Glenn Beck, who is a product of Fox News, which of course is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is, I assure you, a creation of the Rothschild, Bronfman, Oppenheimer gang. this man, Glenn Beck, is being set up, along with Sarah Palin and a couple other people, as potential leaders of a quote-unquote populist movement in this country. Mm-hmm. And this is very, very dangerous because these are, just as I call them in my book, the